Hello everybody, this is my video about John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. The purpose of this video is to understand who Jay was by highlighting key parts of his life. To start it all off, let's dive into a quick description of John Jay's early life. His story starts with his paternal grandfather, Augustus. He was a Huguenot who fled France after the Edict of Nantes was revoked in 1685. After fleeing, Augustus got his family settled in New York. There, his son Peter started his own family with a wife and 10 children, with only 7 making it to adulthood. John Jay was born in 1745 and was the 6th of the 7 surviving children. Down the road, in 1760, Jay entered the newly founded King's College, which will later become Columbia University. There, he underwent the conventional classical education, graduating in 1764. Once his education was done, Jay became a lawyer, which led to the start of his career as a leading founder. Jay, though a young lawyer, served in the Continental Congress of 1774 to 1776, led the draft of the New York Constitution of 1777, and became the state's first Chief Justice during 1777 to 1779. He was President of Congress from December 1778 to late September 1779, when he became the country's minister to Spain, and then joined Benjamin Franklin and John Adams in France to negotiate the Treaty of Paris. Jay returned to serve as America's Secretary for Foreign Affairs from 1784 to 1789 and supported the Constitution with the Federalist Papers and other essays. President George Washington nominated him as the first Chief Justice in 1789, and Jay held the office even as he traveled to Britain in 1794 to negotiate the famous Jay Treaty. Upon returning to America in 1795, Jay found that he had been elected governor of New York. Accordingly, he resigned from the court and served as governor from 1795 to 1801. Until he could conclude the controversial Jay Treaty, he was widely viewed as one of the 3 persons prominent in the public eye as the successor of the actual President of the United States. As the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Jay sought to establish the new court as the keystone of our political fabric, as Washington charged him to do. Jay announced the court's significant decisions, like denying state confiscation laws that after the war ended, rejecting the power of foreign government to establish courts in America to approve captures of ships, and wrote an individual opinion in the controversial decision denying states any sovereign immunity against lawsuits. Jay also issued decisions questioning the validity of a federal law that violated the separation of powers, invalidating a state law that violated the federal constitution, and supported the supremacy of treaties over inconsistent state legislation. These reflected his commitments to strengthen the new federal government that the founders were seeking. Along with being a leading founder, one of the biggest things in Jay's life was his faith. With that said, the scholars who mention Jay's faith generally identify him as an Orthodox Christian. One biography on Jay refers to him as a committed Christian and describes his Huguenot ancestry and Anglican upbringing, but they say little about his faith during his adult years and still less about its impact on his public life. 2 of Jay's older publications of selected papers contain many references to God, but only some of his private discussions of religious beliefs. The first did not identify any political or public actions influenced by his faith, except irresolution about independence, anti-Catholicism in the 1770s, opposing the Tory vestige in the Episcopal Church, and opposition to France. While the second did not discuss any public ramifications of faith at all, neither contained Jay's faith even to anti-slavery activities or peace negotiations. The most recent comment on Jay's faith was done by Jonathan den Hartog, which summarizes his belief in the great plan of providence for the nation as well as for his individual life. The author also connects Jay's efforts to establish the new nation by supporting the Revolution, the Constitution, the Federalist Party, and voluntarist societies. Discussions of Jay in histories of the early republic and in biographies of other founders occasionally acknowledge his faith. For example, Gordon Wood describes him as a Christian enthusiast, in contrast to Jefferson and Adams. Sandra von Berkelio as a devoted Anglican who often used biblical imagery. James Hudson as extolled for fervor of his religious convictions, and Daniel Dierbeck as among the most Orthodox Christians. But these are the exceptions, and typically there is no mention of Jay's faith or its influence. Early in his career in 1780, Jay summarized his thoughts about slavery in a letter to a friend. There, he said, until America creates a law like they did in Pennsylvania, the country's prayer to heaven for liberty will be impious. This is a strong expression, but to Jay it is just, and to back it up, he claims that if he were the legislator, he would prepare a bill just for this. Also, within this letter, Jay indicated not only did religious faith lead to his anti-slavery stance, but that it should impel a legislator to fight against what's wrong. Late in his life, in 1822, Jay praises a religiously informed legislator, William Wilberforce, for doing exactly that in leading the parliamentary fight that abolished this horrid trade. Just like William Wilberforce, Jay showed pious zeal on the slavery issue in governmental offices. For example, in drafting New York's first constitution during 1776 to 1777, Jay sought to insert a clause called for abolishing domestic slavery. As President of Congress in 1779, he supported the unsuccessful proposal to free blacks who joined the Continental Army. While serving as a Secretary for Foreign Affairs in 1785, Jay accepted the presidency of one of the first anti-slavery societies, the New York Society for Promoting the Manumission of Slaves. All of that was politically daring because New York City was the second largest slave trading port in the nation, and the state had over 21,000 enslaved persons. Jay's role was not merely honorary. Among other things, he drafted the Society's petition for a law prohibiting exportation of slaves. The Society also succeeded in obtaining New York law barring importations of slaves and facilitating manumission. Along with that, they established a school that helped assist freed blacks. Despite this, there was a lot of room for criticizing Jay on the slavery issue. During the Missouri controversy, he said slavery ought not to be introduced nor permitted in any of the states, but he only thought it ought to be gradually diminished and finally abolished in all of them. And a quarter of a century earlier, he similarly had said the abolishing of slavery must necessarily be gradual. Even as his principles seemed to forbid it, Jay had enslaved persons throughout his life. He explains it like this: I purchased slaves and manumitted them at proper ages, and when their faithful service shall have afforded a reasonable return. The federal census listed his household as including 5 slaves in 1790, 5 in 1800, and 4 in 1810. His papers showed various manumissions. Jay expressed his concern about treatment of Native Americans to John Adams 6 months after he expressed similar concerns to Thomas Jefferson. They both believed that the Western Indians were uneasy and seemed inclined to be hostile. Injustice is too often done to them, and their aggressors escape with impunity. Altogether, they believed that their government at the time neither gave much terror to evildoers, nor did it support and encourage those who did do such things. When it comes to Jay separately, he used his religious beliefs as the reason for his concern. In his 1777 state constitution, he acknowledged the fraud too often practiced towards the said Indian, and avoided individual purchases of land from Native Americans in 1775. During treaty negotiations, Jay was one of the few who was troubled by the nation's claim of equal rights to Indian land. Otherwise, Jay failed to take much action to right the treatment of Native Americans and missed some opportunities. Jay's overall fame rests primarily on his 2 treaties, the Treaty of Paris in 1783, where his role was pivotal, and the Jay Treaty, which was negotiated in 1794 but ratified in 1795. The first wrestled favorable terms for ending the Revolutionary War, and the second averted a renewed war with Britain. These 2 most important treaties of the 1780s and 1790s involved difficult crossings of the Atlantic and long stays in Europe. Jay's willingness to undertake those peace missions and his relentless pursuit of completed treaties was motivated by his faith. The Chief Justice wrote to his wife when he was nominated as envoy in 1794, "If it should please God to make me instrument to the continence of peace, and in preventing the effusion of blood and other evils and miseries incited to war, we shall both have reason to rejoice. Whatever may be the event, the endeavors will be virtuous, and they should repose unlimited trust in our Maker." Jay did not undertake the mission in a quest of fame or popularity. He realized that any treaty would be widely opposed, as the emerging political parties were divided over Britain and France, and would doom his chances for the presidency. Related to his efforts for peace, Jay was committed to national involvement only in just wars and avoidance of other wars. This commitment was strongly informed by his faith and its Christian just war tradition. In his opinion, there have been just and lawful wars as well as unjust and unlawful wars. Jay knows that it certainly is desirable that wars should be less frequent and should not be waged unjustly or be provoked by aggression. That was a matter of religious principle. For example, when the colonies found their freedom threatened and declared independence, Jay argued that the means of defense must be used or America would be without excuse to our Creator, who gave that freedom. However, when the French Revolution brought war between France and Britain and interfered with American ships, Jay supported neutrality and provided the first draft of Washington's Neutrality Proclamation, including that we have abundant reasons to give thanks unto Almighty God that the United States are not involved in this calamity, though it is better to prefer war to injustice. As president of the Continental Congress during the American Revolution, Jay issued a Thanksgiving proclamation that recommended that the states appoint a specific day to be a day of fasting, humiliation, and prayer to the Almighty God. Jay added to its list of petitions to God that he will cause union, harmony, and mutual confidence to prevail throughout these states and will enable France to be an instrument in protecting the rights of mankind. A year and a half after becoming governor of New York in 1795, Jay wrote and issued a Thanksgiving proclamation recommending that the citizens render unto him, the deity, their sincere and humble thanks for all these his great and unmerited mercies and blessings. The proclamation began with the words, "Whereas the great creator and preserver of the universe is the supreme and sovereign of nations, and does, when and as he pleases, reward or punish them by temporal blessings or calamities according to their national conduct recommends." Jay believes that the issuing Thanksgiving proclamation was proper and paralleled that with his convictions that the government could not be rightfully restrained from providing for the observance of the Sabbath, because it was part of the moral law and the Ten Commandments. Writing to a committee planning celebration for the 50th anniversary of independence, Jay urged it to recommend a general and public return of praise and thanksgiving to God, from whose goodness these blessings descended. A final public ramification of Jay's faith was integrity. Its supreme test came with Hamilton's proposal that Jay, as a governor, manipulate the 1800 election against Jefferson, an atheist in religion and a fanatic in politics, by recalling the state's outgoing Federalist-dominated legislature to change the method of selecting presidential electors, rather than leaving the existing method in place in view of the incoming Republican-dominated legislature. Jay, in his final major public action, recognized this proposal, recalled as being for party purposes, and declined. In this, Jay's integrity was not a minor private matter. It determined the outcome of the election of 1800. Hamilton was right in his electoral vote prediction, and his proposal would have stolen the election from Adams, rejecting its ensured success for Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, which Jay personally opposed. In less polarized times, Jefferson himself had acknowledged Jay's integrity, saying in 1786 that Jay had served in the highest station with a universal approbation, and with a purity of conduct which has silenced even party opprobrium, while never permitting himself to make a shilling in the public employ beyond his salary. Altogether, Jay's faith led him to undertake much public service and many stances that helped people, like opposing slavery and enlisting others in public opposition, negotiating treaties for peace and opposing unwarranted wars, supporting natural rights, securing religious freedom, eliminating the death penalty for numerous crimes, and letting the popular will stand in the election of 1800, and otherwise exhibiting integrity in public office. Even his public activities that are out of fashion today, like Thanksgiving proclamations and public references to religion, left compliance on entirely voluntary grounds. All in all, Jay not only truly pious, but truly great in many ways, as one of the leading founders of the Republic and co-author of the Federalist, as the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court who guided establishing the court, as an anti-slavery voice, though with inconsistencies, as a negotiator of two critical peace treaties, as a potential president who foreclosed his chances by negotiating the Jay Treaty, and by opposing slavery, as a governor who called for many criminal law more just, and as the statesman who refused the Faustian proposal that would have reversed the election of 1800. Most of these followed from his pious faith, and all benefited his country. Thank you for watching my video on John Jay, the first Supreme Court Justice of the United States. Hope you guys enjoyed.